Hello there, and welcome to the Cory Doctorow podcast. I'm actually recording this early, though you'll be hearing it at the same time as normal next week. It's now Thursday, and I'm planning on taking Monday off because I have not yet taken a day off to celebrate finishing For the Win, the novel that I finished last Sunday that you heard me talk about in last week's podcast. So this Monday coming, I'm going to have the day off, have a massage, do some shopping, meet with Alice in the afternoon, and just really take it nice and easy. And not go harrying around the city like a madman or glue myself to my chair and work my ass off at the office. So this podcast is going in the can early. This weekend will be fun and a little more work than usual because Alice is going out to Wales and I'm going to be a single dad. She's going to a conference, so I'm going to have the kid on my own this weekend, which is always fun, but a lot more work than being two parents. And I certainly sympathize with Alice because I go away way more often than she does, and I know how much work it is when she goes. Work goes very well on Epoch. That's the short story I'm writing for Mark Shuttleworth as the final short story for my collection With a Little Help. And other With a Little Help news, Jonathan Coulton has just turned in his introduction, which is a great intro. He should be giving me audio of that soon. And the audio for some of the readings has been coming in as well as all the paperwork and so on. So the book is really coming together. I'm also working on my Publishers Weekly column, the first one, which will introduce the project, and then I'll do a monthly column thereafter to talk about it in more detail. If you hear a funny little noise in the background, that's my DVD ripper ripping. The kid has fallen in love with The Jungle Book. She really likes watching that video, and we've decided that we're going to get her, we in fact have gotten her, a little portable DVD player that we can take around when the time seems right. And it's a funny little thing. It's a Hyundai DVD player. The only car I've ever owned was a Hyundai car, Elantra, I think, for a year. So it's funny to have a Hyundai DVD player. It's easy to forget that some of those Pacific Rim brands are not just cars, they're electronics, or not just electronics, they're cars. You see Mitsubishi trucks on the road in places other than North America and Europe. And it has a little SD reader. So the plan is to rip every Disney DVD we have and all of our Teletubbies discs and the nature films and all the YouTubes and stuff and drop them all on a 32 gig or 64 gig SD card, which will make the battery life essentially infinite and also save us from having to carry around the discs. And just have this little entertainment center with us wherever we go. The only other news is that I'm getting geared up for a season of heavy travel. The next couple of trips, I'm headed to Norway, to Oslo for a day and a half. If you're in Oslo, there will be some public events there. It's the launch for the Norwegian edition of Little Brother. There's some launch events, a party, a debate. I think I'm going to do a talk show, a bunch of other stuff. And then I come home, and the next day I fly to Ottawa. Unfortunately, that one won't have any public events. I'm giving the annual Killam lecture for the Fulbright Foundation, co-sponsored by the U.S. State Department and the Canadian Office of Foreign Affairs. And alas, I cannot open that to the public, but I will be passing through Ottawa very briefly. I'm going to be doing that again in about a month, so and that will be public for a book fair there, a book festival. So I hope to see you that time around. Anyway, enough jibber jabber. On to the reading of Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town, my 2005 Tor science fiction novel. This will also be a 2010 novel from HarperCollins UK Voyager. They climbed into bed together at the same time for the first time since they'd come home, like a domesticated couple, and Mimi dug under her pillow and set something down with a tin tink on the bedstand, a sound too tinny to be the hunting knife. Alan squinted. It was the robot, the one he'd given her, the pretty thing with the Dutchmaster croquelaire up its tuna can skirts. He's beautiful, she said, like you. She wrapped her wings around him tightly, soft fur softer than any down comforter, and pressed her dimpled knees into the hollows of his legs, snuggling in. He cried like a baby once the pain in his hand set in. She pointed the knife point at his face, close enough to stab him, if need be. I won't kill you if you don't scream, she said, but I will be taking one joint of one toe and one joint of one finger tonight, just so you know. He tried not to fall asleep, tried to stay awake and savor that feeling of her pressed against him, of her breath on the nape of his neck, of the enfolded engulfment of her wings, but he couldn't keep his eyes open. Soon enough, he was asleep. What roused him he couldn't say, but he found himself groggily awake in the close heat of those wings held tight. He listened attentively, heard something else, a tinny sound. The robot. His bladder was full. He gently extricated himself from Mimi, from her wings, and stood. There was the robot silhouetted on the end table. He smiled and padded off to the toilet. He came back to find Mimi splayed across the whole bed, occupying its length and breadth, a faintly naughty smile on her face. He began to ease himself into bed again, when he heard the sound, tinny, a little rattle. He looked at the robot. It was moving. Its arms were moving. That was impossible. Its arms were painted on. He sat up quickly, rousing Mimi, who let out a small sound. Something small and bent emerged from behind the robot and made a dash for the edge of the end table. The way the thing ran, it reminded him of an animal that had been crippled by a trap. He shrank back from it instinctively, even as he reached out for the table light and switched it on. Mimi scrunched her eyelids and flung an arm over her face, but he hardly noticed, even when she gave an outraged groan. He was looking at the little crippled thing, struggling to get down off the end table on Mimi's side of the bed. It was the Allen. Though he hadn't seen it in nearly 20 years, he recognized it. Tiny, malformed, and bandy-legged, it was still the spitting image of him. Had Davy been holding on to it all these years, tending it in a cage, torturing it with pins? Mimi groaned again. "Switch off the light, baby," she said, a moment's domesticity. "In a sec," he said, and edged closer to the Allen, which was huddled in on itself, staring and crazy. "Shh," Allen breathed. "It's okay." He very slowly moved one hand toward the end table, leaning over Mimi, kneeing her wing out of the way. The Allen shied back farther. "What are you doing?" Mimi said, squinting up at him. "Be very still," he said to her. "I don't want to frighten it. Don't scream or make any sudden movements. I'm counting on you." Her eyes grew round, and she slowly looked over toward the end table. She sucked in sudden air, but didn't scream. "What is—" "It's me," he said. "It grew out of a piece of me, my thumb, after Davy bit it off." "Jesus," she said. The Allen was quaking now, and Allen cooed to it. "It's hurt," Mimi said. "A long time ago," Andreas said. "No, now, it's bleeding." She was right. A small bead of blood had formed beneath it. He extended his hand farther. Its bandy scurry was pathetic. Holding his breath, Allen gently lifted the Allen. Cradling it in his palms, it squirmed and thrashed weakly. "Shh," he said again. His hands were instantly made slippery and sticky with its blood. "Shh." Something sharp pricked at his hand. Now that he had it up close, he could see where the blood was coming from. A broken-off sewing needle shoved rudely through its distended abdomen. "Cover up," Bradley said. "I'm coming up." They heard his lopsided tread on the steps. Mimi pulled the blanket up around her chin. "Okay," she said. Bert opened the door quickly. He wore nothing but the oversized jeans that Allen had given him, his scrawny chest and mutilated feet bare. "It's going to die," Brad said, hunkering down beside the bed. "Davy pinned it and then sent Link over with it. It can't last through the night." Adam felt like he was choking. "We can help it," he said. "It can heal. It healed before." That's 11 o'clock. And there's Edelweiss. Oh, I love my cuckoo clock. Na 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 na. All right, where were we? Here we go. Adam felt like he was choking. "We can help it," he said. "It can heal. It healed before. It won't this time. See how much pain it's in? It's out of its mind." So what do you want me to do? We need to put it out of its misery, Brad said. It's the right thing. In his hands, the thing squirmed and made a small, hurt sound. Shh, Alan said. The sound it made was like sobbing, but so small, and weak. Mimi said, I think I'm going to be sick. Yeah, Brian said. Yeah, I can see that. She lifted herself out of bed, unmindful of her nudity, and pushed her way past him to the door and to the bathroom. Stop being such a baby, she told Trey as he clutched at his foot. It's almost stopped bleeding already. He looked up at her with murder in his eyes. Shall I take another one, she said. He looked away. If I get word that you've come within a mile of my brother, I will come back and take your eyes. The toe and the finger joint were just a down payment on that. He made a sullen sound, so she took his vain and girlish blonde hair in her fist and tugged his head back and kissed his throat with the knife. Nod if you understand. The knife is under Mimi's pillow. I can't do it, Adam said. I know, Brian said. I will. And he did. Took the knife. Took the Allen. It cried. Mimi threw up in another room, the sound more felt than heard. The toilet flushed, and Brian's hands were sure and swift, but not sure enough. The Allen made a sound like a dog whistle. Bruce's hand moved again, and then it was over. He dug a sock out of the hamper and rolled up the Allen's remains in it. I'll bury it, he said, in the back. Numbly, Allen stood and began dressing. No, he said, I will. Mimi joined them, wrapped in a blanket. Allen dug, and Brent held the sock, and Mimi watched solemnly. A trapezoid of light knifed across the back garden. They looked up and saw Krishna looking down at them from a third-floor window. He was smiling very slightly. A moment later, Link appeared in the window, reeling like he was drunk, giggling. They all looked at one another for a frozen moment. Then Allen turned back to his shoveling. He dug down 3 feet, and Brent laid the little Allen down in the earth gently as putting it to bed, and Allen filled the hole back up. Mimi looked back up at the window, eyes locked on Krishna's. I'm going inside, Adam announced. Are you coming? Yeah, Mimi said, but she didn't. She stayed there for 10 minutes, then 20, and when Allen looked out his window at her, he saw she was staring up at Krishna, mesmerized. He loudly opened his window and leaned out. Mimi's eyes flicked to him, and then she slowly made her way back into the house. She took his pants and his shoes and left him in the park, crying and drunk. All things considered, it had gone well. When Trey told her that he had no idea where her brother was, she believed him. It was okay. She'd find her brother. He had lots of friends. Allen thought that this was the end of the story, maybe. Short and sweet. A kind of Lady or the Tiger thing. Let the reader's imagination do the rest. There on the screen, it seemed awfully thin. Here in the house he'd built for it, it seemed awfully unimportant. Such a big and elaborate envelope for such a small thing. He saved the file and went back up to bed. Mimi was asleep, which was good, because he didn't think he'd be able to fall asleep with her twice that night. He curled up on his side of the bed and closed his eyes and tried to forget the sound the Allen had made. What is wrong with you? Not a thing, she said. Her brother's phone call hadn't been unexpected. You're fucking insane. Maybe, she said. What do you want from me? I want you to behave yourself. You're completely fucking insane. He woke to find Billy gone, a flashback to the day that Fred had gone missing in the night. But then he found a note on the kitchen table, terse. Gone out, B. The handwriting sent him back through the years to the days before Davy came home, the days when they'd been a family, when he'd signed Brad's report cards and hugged him when he came home with a high-scoring paper. Mimi came down while he was holding the note, staring at the few spare words there. She was draped in her wings. Where did he go? I don't know, Allen said. Out. Is this what your family is like? Yeah, Allen said. This is what they're like. Are you going out too? Yeah. Fine, she said. She was angry. She stomped out of the kitchen, stepped on her own wing, tripping and going over on her face. Tomorrow you cut these tomorrow, she said, and her wings flared open, knocking the light fixtures aswing and tumbling piles of books. Tomorrow, she said. Good morning, Natalie, he said. She was red-eyed and her face was puffy, and her hands shook so that the smoke from her cigarette rose in a nervous spiral. Andy, she said, nodding. He looked at her across the railing that divided their porches. Would you like to join me for a coffee? I'm hardly dressed for it, she said. She was wearing a pair of cut-offs and house slippers and a shapeless green t-shirt that hung down past her butt. The Greek doesn't stand on ceremony, he said. He was hardly dressed better. He hadn't wanted to go up to the master bedroom and face Mimi, so he dressed himself out of the laundry hamper in the basement. I don't have shoes, Alan. You could go in and get some, he said. She shook her head. Her shoulders were tense, her whole skinny body a cringe. We'll go barefoot and sit on the patio, he said after a moment, kicking his shoes off. She looked at him and gave him a sad laugh. Okay. The sidewalk was still cool enough for bare feet. The Greek didn't give their bare feet a second look, but brought iced coffees and yogurt with walnuts and honey. Do you want to tell me about them? It's been bad ever since Mimi left. All of a sudden, Krishna's Link's best friend. He follows him around. Alan nodded. Krishna beat Mimi up, he said. I know it, she said. I heard it. I didn't do anything, God damn me, but I heard it happen. Eat, he said. Here. He reached for a clean napkin from the next table and handed it to her. She dried her eyes and wiped her nose and ate a spoonful of yogurt. Drink, he said, and handed her the coffee. She drank. They brought those girls home last night. Little girls, teeny boppers, disappeared into their bedrooms. The noises they made. Drink, Alan said, and handed her the napkin again. Drunk. They got them drunk and brought them home. You should get out of there, Andrew said, surprising himself. Get out. Today, even. Go stay with your mom and find a new apartment next month. She set her cup down carefully. No, she said. I'm serious. It's a bad situation that you can't improve, and the more you stay there, the worse it's going to get. That's not a practical suggestion. Staying there in potential danger is not practical. You need to get out. Staying there will only make things worse for you. She clenched her jaw. You know, there comes a point where you're not giving advice anymore. There comes a point when you're just moralizing, demonstrating your hypothetical superiority when it comes to doing the right thing. It's not very fucking helpful, you know. I'm holding my shit together right now, and rather than telling me that it's not enough, you could try to help me with the stuff I'm capable of. Alan digested this. She'd said it loudly, and a few of the other morning patrons of the Greeks were staring at them. He looked away across the street and spied Billy standing in a doorway, watching. Billy met his eyes, then looked away. I'm sorry, Natalie, he said. You're right. She blew air out her nostrils. What about this? You can knock on my door any time, and I'll make the sofa up for you. He thought of Mimi and cringed inwardly. She'd have to stay upstairs and be quiet if there were strangers in the house. Then he remembered his promise about her wings. He bit his lip. She let out a harsh chuckle. Will I be any safer there? What does that mean? You're the weirdest person I've ever met, Alvin. I mean, sorry, no offense, but why the hell would I knock on your door? She stood and turned on her barefoot heel and took herself away, walking a brisk and gingerly pace. Barry moseyed over and sat in her seat. She'll be okay, he said. He picked up her spoon and began to finish her breakfast. You know, I can't watch the way I could yesterday. Not any more. Too visible. What do I do now? Aaron shrugged. Find a job. Be visible. Get a place to live. We can have each other over for dinner. Brett said, maybe I could get a job where I got to watch. Security guard. August nodded. He closed his eyes. She's very pretty, Barry said. Prettier than Mimi. If you say so. Kurt's awake. Yeah? Yeah. You could introduce me to him. I did it for your own good, you know. She couldn't bring herself to say the words, for the enormity of what she'd done was overwhelming her. She'd found 3 of his friends and treated each of them to an evening of terror and hurt, and none of them would tell her where her brother was. None of them knew. Maybe they'd been innocent all along. "Where are you?" "Far from you," he said. In the background, she heard a girl crying. You've been listening to the Cory Doctorow podcast, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike US 3.0, or as Woody Guthrie put it in another context, this song is copyrighted in the US under seal of copyright 154085 for a period of 28 years, and anyone caught singing it without our permission will be a mighty good friend of ourn, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it, we wrote it, that's all we wanted to do. Many thanks to John Taylor Williams for mastering. That's Ryneck Studio, WRYNECK Studio at gmail.com. John Taylor Williams is a full-time self-employed audio engineer, producer, composer, and sound designer. In his free time, he makes beer, jewelry, odd musical instruments, and furniture. He likes to meditate, to read, and to cook. Talk to you next week.